Hi, and welcome to your peaceful yin flow for the day. This flow will have a combination of longer holds as we would normally have in yin, and then occasionally there will be some movement in between holds just to get a better feeling and a little bit more movement into our hips and also into our joints. So we'll go ahead and get started. If you have your mat and your space ready today, that's great. You might want to have a couple of blocks or maybe even a blanket for some of our postures to make yourself feel more comfortable as we get a little bit deeper today. We'll go ahead and get started in child's pose, and we'll come into a wide-legged child's pose. So big toes come to touch. The knees are opened up to about the width of the mat, and then just allow yourself to fold over, extend the arms out long, and allow the forehead to just kiss the mat as we gently close the eyes and start to move through our flow today. We'll start as we usually do with just a little check-in with the body and with the breath. As we sit with our longer holds today, remember to use your breath to allow yourself to get deeper. And just to make sure that you're not holding, you allow yourself to release and to relax. So one thing with yin, we just allow our breath to flow naturally. Usually in a vinyasa type class, you're focusing on your ujjayi breath with a little constriction at the back of your throat. In yin, we're here to relax and to tell our body that it's safe to be in these postures and that we will not go any deeper than what is safe. In your wide-legged child's pose, focus on feeling the hips become heavy, drawing a little bit further closer to the mat. Check in with the shoulders and the neck. Shoulders should be relaxed and wide across the back. The front and the back of the neck soft. From your wide-legged child's pose, we'll keep the same shape in the lower portion of the body, but we'll start to walk the hands over to the left, just for a nice side body stretch. Feeling it along the right side body. If you want to take it a little deeper, you can even take the right hand and grab a hold of the left forearm. Allow the head to rest down on the mat. And think about keeping that right hip heavy to really emphasize that nice stretch alongside the ribs and underneath the right shoulder. Let's go ahead and walk that over towards the right side. Again, both hands over off to the right side of the mat. Maybe take a hold of the right wrist with your left hand, or the right forearm with the left hand. Relax the head down. This time the left hip feels heavy. Take nice deep breaths all the way along your spine. Feel the breath fill up the rib cage. Slowly start to walk yourself back towards center. We'll go ahead and lift the hips up. And from here, you're in a tabletop. I'd like you to take your hands out a little bit further so you're in a wide tabletop. We're just going to make some space because we want to shift the hips forward and allow them to drop down towards the mat. At the same time, you can have a slight bend in the elbows. And then pick the hips back up and push yourself back into a child's pose. Once again, bringing the hips forward, dropping them down like you're coming into a cobra, and then push yourself back. Then shifting forward and back. We'll take this 2 more times. And on the last time, we'll allow the hips to come to the mat and just rest, and then draw your forearms in front of you so that the elbows are just slightly in front of the rib cage, and you have your Sphinx pose. We'll hold the Sphinx here for about 8 to 10 breaths. You can go ahead and close your eyes. Keep the chest lifted so that the heart of your chest is lifting up and at the same time a little bit forward. Maybe draw the elbows back like you're trying to pull them towards your body. As you do that, you'll feel the front line of the body start to engage, and maybe deepen yourself a little bit more into that back bend. Now you can continue to stay in your Sphinx pose. If you want to deepen your Sphinx, you can take your fingertips or come to your fingertips and then press into the mat and come into seal pose. Remember that the closer your hands are towards your body, when you're lifted like this, the deeper the back bend. So if you need to take a little bit of the back bend out of it, make sure to walk your hands further forward or just return back into Sphinx. If you are up in seal, go ahead and lower yourself down. We're going to take our hands down in front of us, and we can go ahead and allow the forehead to touch the back of the hands. At the same time, draw that left leg up into a half frog position. You may need to roll onto your right hip slightly, even grab the bottom of that left leg to help pull it in, and we'll take a half frog and just open up throughout that left hip. Take any adjustments that you need. If you need to put a blanket underneath the knee for a little bit of padding, wherever you're at, we'll take about a minute here in our half frog. Start to lift your head from your hands. Maybe come up onto the elbows. And here's a little tricky part. We're going to come into a supine twist from our half frog. So you may want to lift that right hip up just slightly and then come onto the very outside of that right hip. At the same time, draw the right hand underneath the left arm. And we're going to get ourselves twisted as we bring the back of that right arm, the back of the right shoulder to the mat. And then allow ourselves to unravel so that our back is on top of the mat, and now the left leg is crossed over the body. You can take the right hand and bring it to the outside of the left leg. The left hand can come to a T shape or maybe even into cactus arms, whatever is comfortable for you, and we'll just hold this supine twist for a couple of minutes. Relax and let yourself fall more deeply into the pose. Remember, yin is about finding our edge and coming up to about maybe 30-40% of where that edge is at. And from there, use your breath. Use the body as it relaxes and finds itself more deeply into the pose to sink a little bit deeper. You may find that your twist becomes a little more pronounced the longer that we hold the pose. Use the breath to find your ease and your comfort. On the next inhale, release your right hand. If you had it on the outside of that left leg, go ahead and cross the left hand over and across the body and use that left hand to push yourself into the mat and then return back to a Sphinx pose. Allow that left leg to extend back, maybe shift the hips back and forth. Just give them a little bit of a rock to counter that twisting and counter the movement that we just had in the hips. From here, we'll take our puppy pose. So let's move the hands underneath the shoulders, shift our hips back. So we come through tabletop. And from tabletop, we're going to take a much wider stance by drawing the hands out in front of us and then slowly start to shift the hips. The chest. The hips stay directly above the knees. The chest comes down towards the mat, and the forehead can also rest down onto the mat. Now, if this is comfortable for you here, you may want to have the chin on the mat if you're really open throughout the shoulders and throughout the chest. But we'll hold this puppy pose. In yin, we call this melting heart. You may notice that a lot of the poses, I do it myself, whether it's yin or vinyasa. When I'm doing yin, sometimes I use the other names interchangeably, just so that everyone can recognize that what we're doing. Opening up through the front part of the shoulders, deepening down. Allow your shoulders to soften. Check back in through the muscles of the face. In between the eyes should be relaxed. The muscles along the jaw should be nice and soft. Very good. From puppy pose, shift yourself forward. We'll come back to the hips touching the mat, and then we're back in Sphinx pose. And from Sphinx, we'll take our half frog on the right side. So you can draw your hands in front of you, forehead to the hands, and draw that right knee up into that about approximately 90-degree position. Use your hands to help lift that leg up if you need to. And then we'll just hold this half frog and breathe into that right hip. If you're doing a yin or a vinyasa class right away in the morning, you might wonder, why am I so stiff in the morning? That should be when we're the most relaxed, right? But all the fascia, not just the muscles, the fascia which connects our entire body, it runs throughout the entire body. It's this interlaced webbing that encapsulates everything throughout the body. And throughout that webbing, there is kind of a gel-like substance, a lubrication. And as we sleep and we're still for long periods of time, that lubrication kind of thickens. Also, our body temperature drops a little bit as we sleep, and that also causes the lubrication to thicken. So doing a yin or a slow practice to get yourself moving in the mornings is great to get everything going again. From our half frog, we're going to take that little funky transition into our supine twist. So you can push yourself up onto your elbows. Then maybe lift that left hip so you come to the outside, the very outside of that left hip. Then spin that left arm across the body so that now the back of the left shoulder is on the mat and you're drawing the entire back side of the body towards the mat. So now the right leg is over the left side of the body, and you can take the left hand to the outside of the right thigh for your twist. And however you would like your right arm, if you want it at the T shape or in cactus, whatever feels good for you. Closing your eyes and just taking a few breaths here. Take a moment to check in with yourself. Feel yourself ride that breath on the inhale. Feel the stomach rise, and on the exhale, feel yourself release. Maybe the right shoulder comes all the way to the mat. Maybe it doesn't. It's just that intention of feeling that downward pull, that energy, drawing that right shoulder back, keeping that right knee twisted over towards the earth. On the next inhale, we'll unravel, draw the right arm back across the body so it comes to the right side of the mat, and untwist yourself. So now we come back into our Sphinx pose, and from Sphinx, let's push our hands underneath us, and we'll come back through tabletop, and then just come to a seated position right into the center of your mat. Now from here, we're going to come into just some windshield wipers, but I'd like you to get set up so that your bum is just slightly off the edge of your mat. I find that helps keep you from traveling and from moving along your mat. So the right shin is about parallel to the front or the side of your mat, and then the left shin is almost parallel with the back side of your mat. It doesn't need to be perfect, but from here, we'll take the hands behind us and then just shift the legs from right and then to left, moving into the hips. Just getting a little bit of lubrication in the joints, a little bit of movement. We'll do one more on each side, and we'll end with the right shin facing the top of the mat. And from here, let's bring our hands in front of that right knee, pick the hips up, and we'll start to set ourselves up for our Swan Pose, or half pigeon, as we would call in a vinyasa. So take that right shin to whatever angle feels good for you and for your knee, and then walk that left leg out behind you so it's nice and straight. Maybe give a look over that left shoulder to double check so that we're not rolling in or out onto that left knee. And then from here, just sit back. Check in with your pelvis so that you're evenly balanced and that you're not rolling over to the side of that right hip. If you do need a little bit of padding, a blanket underneath that right hip will help immensely. From here in your Swan Pose, you can either stay up high, that will give you more of a back bend, or start to walk the hands out in front of you, and we'll hold. Wherever you're at, whether you're up on your hands, your forearms, or if you want to come all the way down so that your stomach is just rolled over the top of that right shin in your sleeping swan. Just breathe. Allow yourself to melt into those areas of the body that feel tight. Our joints can sometimes feel very stiff in the morning too. And of course, our joints have fluid in between the bones, in between the spaces of the bones. And the bones themselves, the ends are protected in cartilage. As we rest overnight, the cartilage tends to absorb some of that fluid, kind of like a little sponge. And that's why we need to get some gentle movement back into the body, back into the joints. Move that fascia.
Get everything lubricated again so that we can feel good throughout the rest of the day. If you happen to have scar tissue, then you are maybe working a little harder. If you've had knee surgery, maybe surgery on your hip, our bodies all have their own little foibles that we have to work around. When you're ready, you can slowly start to come out of your swan pose. Slowly lift the torso up. Use the strength in the hands and the arms. And from here, just shift yourself onto that right hip, and we'll draw the left leg in the front. We're going to come into a fire log pose. Fire log can be very challenging for most people. You take the right shin, it should be parallel with the top of the mat, and then you stack the left shin on top of the right. Now, if that is very uncomfortable for your hip, your knee, I suggest just setting that left shin in front of the right shin. Maybe open up the knees a little bit wider so you have some space in between the legs. Now, you can either stay upright there, or you can also start to walk your torso to deepen the stretch into the hips. If you are in your fire log and the left shin is topped right onto that right shin, you may notice that there's a gap in between your knee and your foot. That's fine. If it's comfortable having it like that, you can go ahead and leave it there. You can stay tall in your fire log pose, or you can also start to walk the hands forward and drape the torso over the legs, deepening that stretch in the outside of the left hip flexor. That's where you're really going to start to feel it. If you are folded over, just check in with the neck and the head so that the head hangs heavy and the neck is nice and soft. Remember, we don't want to pull in our yin class. Just relax as best as you can, using the breath, using your props, so that you can come to about 30 to 40% of your edge. And from there, use your breath to deepen and see if you can go further. Any sharpness or anything that feels unusual, come out of the pose, maybe back out 20 to 30% even, and slowly make your way back in. In your fire log, use your hands to push yourself upright if you were folded over. You can even use your hands to help yourself move the legs. Allow them to extend out in front of you. Not fully straight, but maybe about just so that the knees have a nice bend in them. And from here, we're going to fold ourselves over into this caterpillar shape. Just rounding the torso. Maybe taking the legs a little wider. And the head can drop down in between the legs. Take a nice deep breath in. And as you relax, maybe feel the torso deepen and feel fully supported by your legs. On an inhale, let's lift up. We'll go ahead and cross the ankles and come through to a tabletop. Now for this next position, it isn't specifically a yin pose, but we're just going to use it to open up into our back a little bit. And we'll take a supported camel. So come to a kneeling position. You may want to have your blocks with you. And depending on where you're at in your camel, will depend on the height that you want your blocks. But from here, we're just going to start back. You can start on whatever height you feel is safe and supported, and we'll come into a nice camel. Wherever you're at in your camel, make sure that hips are lifted and reaching towards the front of the room. The neck can stay lifted as I have, or you can also allow it to drop back. I do like to have a little bit of support in my neck, so I like to keep my neck slightly lifted. Nice inhale and exhale here. Feel the stretch along the front side of the body, also the front of your shoulders, as you really drive those hips towards the front of the room. This isn't a long hold, so on the next inhale, go ahead and lift yourself up. You can take your blocks with you, maybe set them to the side, and we'll come into our half pigeon on the left side or our swan on the left. So you can step that right foot back, straighten the right leg, draw the left knee behind the left hand, and maybe walk that right leg out a little further. Check back to make sure everything is lined up nice on that right side. And then also check in with the pelvis so that you're evenly balanced between the left and the right. And from here, you can go ahead and walk yourself down into your pigeon. Key into any differences between your left and your right hip. They might be small. They might be justifiably different. You may want to use props on one side, whereas the other side you can feel that you can get away without any props. Our bodies are unique, and really they are unique on a day-to-day basis. The beauty of yin is it allows us to tap into those small nuances and those little sensations. And you can say, hey, this is a little different today. On an inhale, we'll lift ourselves up and we'll shift over onto that left hip to draw the right leg around and to the front. And we'll set ourselves up for fire log pose. So again, remember, as I just said, you may be different, very different from one side to the other. So whether your right shin is stacked on top of the left shin or if you have it in front, it's perfectly fine and it's perfectly normal. Wherever you're at, we'll start to walk the torso forward as far as you feel like you want to go this morning or afternoon, whenever you're doing this class. I also like to do a little bit of yin work right before bed. It's always nice to get a little bit of movement in the joints at the end of the day. I find I can be really stiff after being at work all day. And Doing some movements like this before you go to sleep can help you have a better night's rest.
With care, use your hands to lift yourself back upright. You can also use your hands to unravel the legs, extend them out long, this time in front of you. You can bring your hands down to your sides and maybe just give the legs a little wiggle. You can also windshield wiper the legs if your hips feel like they need a little bit more movement. And then we'll cross the feet, roll over our ankles, and we'll come back into a kneeling position, this time with our hips just sitting down onto our feet so that our tops of our feet are flat on the floor. You may want a little blanket underneath the feet for some padding, or even doubling up your mat into this variation of your hero's pose. From here, we'll take some side body leans. Inhale the arms up and then lower the left arm down towards the mat. And just allow the right arm to come over towards the side. Spin the chest up so it's facing the sky. And then inhale back up. And as you exhale, we'll draw the right hand down. Side body lean over to the right, bending that right elbow, lifting the chest up and feeling the left hip stay heavy. On an inhale, we'll come back up. We'll take that a couple more times from each side. Side body lean towards the left. The right hip stays heavy. Inhale up, exhale over and across to the right. Stretching along the right side or the left side of those ribs. One more time each side. On this last one, we'll return to center in our hero's pose. Now you're welcome to stay here. We're going to take a hero's pose and also lean back into our hero's pose. So if you want to keep your body weight over the tops of your feet, you can stay here. You can stay fully upright. You can also use your blocks and maybe start to lean back like so, even coming to the forearms or even all the way down to your mat. Now that is a few variations you can take in hero. If you would like to take the full variation of hero's pose, then you would want to widen the knees slightly so that you also widen the feet so that you can bring the bottom to rest in between the feet. So now the knees are at quite a narrow angle, and this can be really intense for the knees. So if this does not feel good for you, maybe don't come into this pose, or you can also sit up on a block, and this feels much less intense. Now that level of intensity is up to you, and whether you feel like you can tolerate that for a couple of minutes. Wherever you're at, you can try any of those variations. If you're in the more advanced hero pose, You can also come down to your forearms or even all the way down to your mat. Whatever suits you today, just use your breath and remember to don't go beyond what your body is telling you it can handle you at this moment. Coming out of this pose can be a little tricky. Remember to use the strength in your arms to bring yourself to upright. From here, we'll use the hands to lift the hips up. Draw the feet back underneath the hips if you had them open up into that full hero's pose. Maybe give the feet a little bit of a tap. Allow everything to flow back into those joints to refresh and renew. And from here, go ahead and sit back onto the feet. Draw the hands behind you, and we'll go ahead and lift the hips for just one little juicy stretch. Lifting the hips, opening into the front of the shoulders, pressing into the hands. One nice deep breath in, and then exhale. Release the hips down. We'll go ahead and walk the hands forward and return from where we started into a wide-legged child's pose, opening up the knees. Allow the big toes to touch and draw the arms out in front of you as we start to wind down and close up our practice for today. Take these last couple of minutes to tune in, to really delve inward. Use this time to just make sure the breath is nice and even and steady. Normal calming breaths here. When you're ready, we'll use the hands to push ourselves to an upright position. You can shift the hips off of the feet and then spin yourself around and come into a nice cross-legged sit into the center of your mat. From here, we'll all take a nice inhale, draw the hands up towards the sky. The palms come to kiss, and then draw them down through heart center with a small tuck of the chin as we bow. And with gratitude, I thank you for coming to take this class today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Make it amazing. Bye.